It took me several weeks, but I finally caught up with Ultramarathoner, New York Times bestselling author, and most importantly, a great guy, Dean Karnazes. Thanks for joining me from California, also known as the Left Coast. How are you?
I'm dealing with what's going on, just as everyone, I think, across the entire world is dealing right now. But it's good to be talking with you again.
Life for you since COVID-19 started, what's it been like?
It's been an adjustment. I mean, this is supposed to be the busiest year, basically, of my career. So, I mean, I had international plans travel throughout the year, and without exception, every single event that I was supposed to be at has been canceled. So it's been a shock because, I do a lot of keynote corporate speaking. All of my keynote address events have been canceled. All sporting events have been canceled. It's been quite an adjustment to be at home, to kind of figure out how to get through every day, because this is the longest I've gone without traveling, I think, since I started this career a couple decades ago. And it's been a little jarring. I've got this incredible wanderlust. You can get lost on the trails locally for so long before you want to travel. And so that's been a bit of an adjustment. But, I'm also a realist. Times are what they are, and I can't foresee I'm going to be getting on a jet flying international anytime this year or anytime perhaps even most of next year.
It seems that there are two effects from an exercise point of view that COVID-19 has caused, and one of those is that people have stayed in the house, picked up 15 pounds, just like the freshman 15. But on the other hand, in this area we saw more and more people out walking, running, exercising. Is there a silver lining in all of this?
There's a tremendous silver lining, especially for running and endurance sports, in that more people than ever have taken up, I would say, jogging. So these are not people that, if you ask them, are you a runner? They would say, no, I'm not a runner, but I run. So these are newbies into running, and they're discovering the delight of putting your body in pain, how it brings a certain level of satisfaction and reward. So certain footwear companies are doing really, really well right now. I mean, I just read a report about a particular brand called Hoka. Their sales are up 261% since the lockdown. So hopefully, these people will keep it up. And when racing comes back online, they'll sign up for a local 5K or a 10K. So I'm really optimistic about the future. And more than that, I'm really happy that so many people are getting out and exercising.
We are speaking with Dean Karnazes, ultramarathoner. Dean, people at some point in their life make a decision to go one way or the other, and you made a decision in August of 1992, 28 years ago, that really changed your life. You were at a bar, and what happened after that?
Well, I wasn't a runner prior to that, but I was very good at drinking, so the old college habit stuck with me until my 30th birthday, which was that date you just quoted. And at midnight in the bar, I told my buddies I was leaving, and they said, well, it's your 30th birthday. Let's have another round of tequila to celebrate. And I said, no, I'm going to go run 30 miles to celebrate instead. And they looked at me and they said, but you're not a runner, you're drunk. And I said, yeah, I am, but I'm still going to do it. And I literally walked out of the bar. I didn't even own running gear at the time, but I had these comfortable silk boxer underwear on. So I peeled off my pants and just started stumbling south. I knew there was a city called Half Moon Bay that was 30 miles away from San Francisco, and I set my sights on Half Moon Bay and drunkenly stumbled off into the night.
And so, of course, that explains a lot about the attitude in California. Nobody even bothered to stop you in your underwear, right?
That's California. I think people probably thought I'd escaped from an insane asylum or something. I don't think they were worried as me being a threat.
Well, then it did change your life, and then little by little, you really dedicated yourself to doing that. And your first book, Ultramarathon Man, Confessions of an All-Night Runner, you had talked to me earlier that looking at possibly doing a movie. What's the progress on that?
Yeah, it's very interesting you asked. So a producer bought rights to make a movie of that first book and is in the process of getting that done. I helped write the script. So I've been involved in forming the script, and he's talking to studios, and there's quite a bit of an interest from studios. And I think the reason being is that runners love other runners' stories, but I didn't want this to be a runner story. I wanted this to be a universal story, and I think it struck the right chord. So it's moving, believe it or not, even during the pandemic, it is moving forward.
You talk about the magic of running and about embracing suffering. You believe that suffering is a good thing. How is that?
I think we're never more alive than when we're struggling and when we're trying to overcome some obstacle. I think that's when our blood and our juices are flowing most strongly. I think that when we're comfortable, we're somewhat miserable. In fact, we've largely built a society around comfort, and I think a lot of us have found that we're so comfortable, we're miserable. Everything we do comes easy. There's no struggle. There's no hardship. And, when you set a course to run a half marathon or a marathon or an ultra marathon, you encounter difficulties and it hurts and you've got to surmount these things. And I think that we humans need something like that. We need a battle. And a marathon is certainly a battle.
Do you think that's why it's so difficult for so many people now with COVID-19? It's extremely difficult. There's a lot of suffering.
This is even for an ultramarathoner, this is an interesting period because the finish line is uncertain. So imagine starting a marathon and, getting to 26.2 and someone announcing, well, we've changed the finish line, keep going, and you go around another corner and they tell you the same thing, and then you go around another corner and there's Dr. Fauci saying this might last for another year. So that's been a particular challenge. It's just uncertain, the future. And thankfully, I'm kind of comfortable with uncertainty, but I know a lot of people are struggling.
We are joined by Dean Karnazes, ultramarathoner. Dean, as usual, I have some questions from some listeners, and let's go, first of all, Adam in Pennsylvania wants to know, how can one continue running safely when you have issues, and how do you decide when you really shouldn't be running?
Joe, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask that because I've never had a running-related injury, and when I experience pain and hurt, I run through it. That's how I cope. I just push through it, and my body's always responded. But I know a lot of my friends have injuries, and it's a fine line between pushing too hard. It's up to each individual to know where that is and do their best not to cross it, but you're certainly putting yourself at some risk when you start exercising. I still think that a lot of people overemphasize the risk, and they use the risk and the fear of getting injured as an excuse not to exercise. And I think that there's more of that going on than people getting injured from exercising.
Mark from Georgia has a question. Do you ever think that you'll scale back to a recreational runner that is at about maybe 5 miles a day if health or family commitments require you to do that? Or are you too, and he says, in quotes, addicted to do that?
My family has always come first, so I always put my family before running. I think that if I couldn't run at all, some part of me would be missing. I wouldn't be complete. So I continued running, and I have scaled back, I've got to be honest, just out of respect for others and what everyone is going through. But I think if I don't run, I'm just a different Dean, and I'm not quite as pleasant, I'm not quite as available in there. So I think it's just something that I need to keep up. And whether that be 3 fast miles or 50 miles, I'll take what I can get. In this instance, in this day and age, I'll take whatever I can get.
Well, that brings up another point. You'll be 58 years of age. How have you changed in your attitude toward running, physically how you've changed, and also mentally your feelings about it?
It's been interesting because, your speed, as you know, you're a runner and you're a little bit older as well. Your speed goes out the window. So I've got to work twice as hard now to maintain the same sort of finish times that they used to come more easily. I'm also spending a lot more time cross-training. So I've really dedicated myself to just being the most complete athlete I can be. And that involves training, cross-training, diet and nutrition, sleep. And it also involves interpersonal relationships, especially now more than ever, is having harmonious interpersonal relationships, I think is so essential for an athlete. And I think a lot of athletes overlook that they think that if they have turmoil and stress, that they can just perform at the normal level. And I really, really try to maintain harmonious interpersonal relationships.
Last question comes from Brian in Pennsylvania. He wants to know, how are you able to sustain interest in running as well as the strength to just get out the door? With age, it means it gets more difficult to get out. And Brian says he knows the benefits, but it just gets tougher and tougher to get out there and do it.
Yeah, well, one thing that I think helps me, Brian, is I use this technique called projection. And basically, I project how much better I will feel when I walk back in the door after exercising. And I use that to really get me out the door. Think about a time when after you've exercised, how good and, just that peace you felt, and use that as a driver to get you going.
Well, the one great thing is, Dean, I always try to reinforce what you just said, and we'll talk about the Badwater race. That'll certainly have people understand how good you felt after that. Could you explain what the Badwater race was?
Yeah, the Badwater race is a 135-mile foot race across Death Valley, which is the hottest place on Earth, and it's held in the middle of summer. Badwater is the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere, and the finish line is at Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in the contiguous U.S. So the idea is to run 135 miles across Death Valley from the lowest point to the highest point, and there you have the Badwater Ultramarathon.
And you had to run on the white line. I saw a picture of you, and what's that all about?
Well, many times I've done this race, the temperatures exceeded 120 degrees. And when it gets that hot, the asphalt, the pavement actually gets up over 200 degrees. So it'll literally melt the soles of your shoes. So all of the racers stay on the white line on the side of the road, which is a little bit cooler than the black asphalt. And that helps keep your feet cooler and not melt your shoes.
Some final moments with Dean Karnazes, ultramarathoner. Over the years, we've talked about some funny stories, some great stories you've had. You have an interesting one that had to do with being on a treadmill.
Oh, yeah, that was a crazy one. So one time I ran as a fundraiser for 48 hours on a treadmill. It was actually on the Live with Regis and Kelly show on a busy street corner in Manhattan. And I was running in a kind of a glass bubble. And Live with Regis and Kelly, their studio's in the same studio, the ABC studio, as the World News. So on the second day of running, it'd been about 44 hours of running. I was chafing, in places the sun don't shine. And at the back of my treadmill, I had my kit with some Vaseline in there. And I kind of looked out the window. And there are 200 people, Joe, looking at me running on this treadmill. I kind of just put my hands up like, I got to do what I got to do. So I hop off the treadmill. I reach into my bag. I grab some Vaseline. I stick my fingers in there, rub it where the sun don't shine. And then hop back on the treadmill. And there was no rag or anything to wipe my hand clean. So I continue running. And as I'm running, I noticed this motorcade pull up to the corner. And these guys with Ray-Ban dark glasses on and earbuds kind of pop out, big guys in suits. And they started, standing around the corners looking suspiciously at people. And then a limousine pulls up. And some dignitary gets out of this limousine, and he's kind of surrounded, he or she is kind of surrounded in this posse of bodyguards, and they go into the ABC World News for an interview, I presume. So I just think, wow, that's kind of interesting. I kept running, and about an hour later, I see all of these bodyguards surrounding this person coming up to me on the treadmill. So they finished the interview, they'd walked out, they're now in the lobby, and they come up to me, and to see a bodyguard's kind of parts. And standing there is Barack Obama, of all people. And he looks up at me and he says, Dean, I heard about what you're doing. I'm so amazed. I got to shake your hand. And I start reaching for his hand and think, oh, where's his hand just been? So I had the wherewithal to give him a presidential fist pump. And that was my moment of greatness with Barack Obama.
Well, maybe that was foretelling the future because they say that we may never shake hands again.
Had it been now, it would have been an elbow pump, right? Yeah.
Finally, Dean, what's the future for you?
The future for me right now is getting through where we're at. It's so hard to predict where to go from here, and I'm sure it is for everyone. But, my future, I can tell you this, involves continuing to run, continuing to push the boundaries that my age will permit, and hopefully more races I'll be able to come back online at some point down the road. So continuing to race and travel the globe and, encourage and hopefully inspire others to lace up a pair of shoes and hit the trails.
Dean, once again, thanks for joining me. I try to make this an annual event. It's been a little more than a year we talked. Things really changed, but let's hope a year from now things will change again.
I look forward to our anniversary next year and discussing where things were and where they are now.
Thanks for joining me, Dean.
My pleasure.